hey, if you think you got a good business idea, like try to ignore it and like it will go away. And like you good things that you didn't like go down the path. And that's what.
Welcome to Talk Tuesday, a webinar series where we explore what it takes to kickstart new projects, launch new products, and create the right conditions for team success. I'm Eric Gorman, founder of Wiley, an agency that helps teams innovate faster with less risk through our sprint workshops and training. We help teams get aligned, eliminate unproductive meetings, and make rapid progress using our interactive, repeatable sprint workshops. Skill up with our training at wearewiley.com. And now to our guest. It's my great pleasure now to introduce our special guest, Mike Kerr, CTO and co-founder of StreetFair. He's also former VP of engineering at Passport, a transportation tech firm headquartered here in Charlotte. And before that, he was actually head of engineering at Kingsman Software. We've got some great friends at Kingsman. We did a design sprint for them several years ago, which I think how we first became in connection. Yeah. So, Mike, get us started. Start us off with combo. Maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself, personal, professional, wherever you want to go with that, as well as maybe an introduction to StreetFair.
Cool. All right. Pleasure to meet everyone. I'll keep it about myself short, and we'll dive into the StreetFair background. But I came up the ranks as a software engineer. I've been doing software engineering for over 15 years now, and really love building products. I started in large organizations and always kind of had a knack for being an entrepreneur myself. And finally, over the years, I've spent plenty of time talking about it. I started to shift more towards smaller and smaller businesses before ultimately making the dive and starting StreetFair. So I guess it was almost 3 years ago now. It was the middle of the pandemic. My partner, Teddy, and I stuck at home. He was actually the VP of product. I was the VP of engineering at Passport. We had any different ideas. We were constantly kicking around just both, entrepreneurs. And we were actually like thinking about starting a pool business. We were like, hey, everyone's putting in pools left and right. I said, no, but hey, we should have cleaned all these pools. And well, maybe we'll just like start a side hustle or just like buy a pool cleaning business and like hire a crew and see where it takes us. And we started diligencing what it looks like to build an effective and efficient, pool cleaning business. And long story long, that didn't go anywhere, but it led us to this realization that like what mattered was it was all around the cost was all around labor and materials. And so like, hey, how can we get customers that live close to one another? Like we want to go to one street and clean 10 pools. We don't want to drive all over Charlotte to clean 10 pools. So we started just ideating on all these different tactics that we can use to like drive customers like close to one another. And that idea kind of just fizzled out. We never bought a pool cleaning business, but we were still stuck at home during COVID. And I would always go for long walks around my neighborhood. I just needed to get out of the house. And like both of us couldn't help but realize all of the different businesses in the neighborhood that were doing the same work. I would walk down my street and see 12 different landscaping companies mowing lawns. Or like, this doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't, one company come in and mow all 12 houses' lawns and pass along a little bit of a group discount to everybody? And so we wound up creating StreetFair instead. So StreetFair is an online marketplace for homeowners to find and hire, quality home maintenance businesses that are recommended from their neighbors. And oftentimes one of the benefits is, as more and more neighbors hire the same business, they typically will like pass along somewhat of a group discount. But if nothing else, it's a really good and effective way to quickly get to the answer of like, hey, does anybody know a good gutter cleaner or pressure washer or, a lawn guy? Well, now you could just go on to StreetFair and kind of see who your neighbors use and review, recommendations from folks in the neighborhood.
You mentioned a couple of things. One that I kind of picked up on, you were observing, right? That's so critical. I think we kind of get comfortable and lulled into our normal day-to-day, but having those fresh eyes where you're like, hey, this doesn't quite make sense. I found that really fascinating. Yeah. And it's like, maybe talk a little bit about that mindset of just being open to learning where there's interest or demand, or maybe some pains in the world.
Yeah, ironically, Teddy called me one day and he was like, hey, he started this sentence and I like finished the sentence. I've been feeling and seeing this for so long and I just couldn't quite like put my hands on it. And then like the second that he started going down that path, I was like, yes, like we need to do this. We need to do it now. And actually some advice that I've gotten and read about over the years is often like, hey, if you think you got a good business idea, like try to ignore it, and like it will go away, and like you good things that you didn't like go down the path. And that's what happened for like 4 or 5 other ideas that we had. We like thought it was a great idea, and then we got busy with our jobs and never went anywhere. But this was one that we just couldn't stop thinking about, and we continued to observe for months. And then finally, we're just like, hey, on one hand, you want to find a problem big enough that's worth solving, where there's a large enough addressable market where you can go build a big business out of it. And on the other hand, it's so intimidating. Like, are we really going to go try to solve this problem? Like, it seems like a massive problem that affects, all homeowners. But we decided to take a big swing.
I have a question too, because you mentioned Teddy. So Teddy's your business partner, and obviously you were colleague. So they're both can be, like, on one hand, magic of partnering with somebody, right? And idea sharing and launching something, and it's a marriage, and a lot of marriages end in disaster, divorce. Yeah. So how, like, what advice do you have for kind of like finding that right person if you were to join forces with somebody? Like, what should you be looking for?
So number one, you should definitely find another person to go through this journey. Full stop. Like, don't try to do it yourself. Don't do it yourself. And candidly, like, from an investability perspective, like, VCs want to see you as a strong counterpart as well, right? And so, definitely take the time to get to know them and vet them. Like, it is a marriage. Teddy and I love each other, right? There are days we probably want to kill each other. We had the benefit of working together for 2.5, 3 years beforehand. So we really understood what it looked like to work together. I see so many people who, fall in love with this idea and they rush into, a partnership because they're just so excited about it. And they're just thinking about all the positive things. They underestimate just, you're going into war with this person. You're spending a lot of time together, making a lot of big decisions and a lot of stress. And so I think it is, like, really important to find someone that you're compatible with and that complement your skill set. It's funny, like, a lot of the folks check in with us. Hey, how's it going? How's everything going? Or how are things with, like, you guys? Or like, yeah, it's fine. Like, things aren't. It's a thing. It's a thing.
Well, the niche is probably develop your organization.
It is. Totally.
You mentioned something earlier about diligencing, and I want to get to that in the context of the approach you took for StreetFair. But to follow this thread, which is equally, if not more interesting, I want to actually ask, like, that marriage in terms of that Teddy, but what about the real marriage, right? Like, what do you, that's conversation with your other half, right? You've got kids, family, big decision to land us relatively safe. I'm sure, relatively safe corporate job and go back on your own. I've had that conversation with my better half. I'm curious about how you had that with yours.
Honestly, I think it's super important for your spouse to be aligned, right? It's a big change and it's a big risk. Honestly, without my wife, I probably wouldn't be here, right? I mean, she, supports me for just about anything I want to do. And so, and she's got a risk tolerance like myself too. And so when I approached her, and she's just, hey, I know if you think that, it's a good idea, like, go do it. And I don't know that many wives would have said that. Hey, why don't you go, give up that huge salary and bonus and equity and whatever else for, something that might work, 1% chance. Maybe that's why some people do it. Maybe that's why some people don't. But your spouse has to be aligned. Although I'll tell you, she is totally like, all right, come on. Like, how long is this thing going to take? When I'm going to sell this thing?
What love is?
And
she kills me.
So you mentioned, like, that 1% chance of success, right? I mean, it's a school of hard knocks, right? Like, so what was that strategy? I think, you mentioned diligencing. What are those conditions that you're instilling or searching for to, there's no chance bulletproof that, not 100% guarantee your success, but certainly what are you doing to lay the foundation and create the right conditions to at least improve your chances of success?
Yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, a lot of it comes down to team, right? Getting the right people on the bus at the right time. And so early on, just building I'm a firm believer in small teams are better than larger teams. And then, honestly, one of the biggest things is just trying to figure out how to approach the problem in a capital efficient manner. I think some people go raise a few $1 million from some VCs and can't wait to go spend 2 of it on like a prototype or like the first version of the product. I think we've all read the book, The Lean Startup, and are like firm believers in that approach. And, our challenge to ourselves from the beginning is, hey, how can we spend the least amount as possible to learn and to iterate and validate, some of these assumptions, and then unlock additional spend and unleash additional growth. But we try to be really intentional and thoughtful at each step.
You guys, you and Teddy, in my humble opinion, were some of the most well-read and prepared among startups we've ever worked with. And in the context of like the right lean way to build an organization from the ground up, and also, how to validate that offering. I mean, you also the go-to-market strategy was very sound and disciplined.
Yeah.
So like I was very in awe of the discipline and the structure and the knowledge you guys brought to bear. Like, how do you get that? One is like, there's experience, right? But there's also, I think, like some stuff that you had knowledge gaps. How'd you go about that process of identifying your own gaps, your own knowledge base, which is hard to do, to recognize that, number one. And then how'd you go about like trying to fill those piece by piece?
Totally. I think there's a few things that come to mind. One is like, we are absolutely like students of the game. I read religiously. Teddy's more of a podcaster, but either way, like we are content consumers. Most of the problems that we're out trying to solve are problems that other people have faced in one way or another. And it's not always the exact same business domain, right? But you can pick up different, tips and tricks from those before us and take a shortcut, if you will. And so one is like, we've just studied tremendously on different marketplace businesses and different domains, and tried to learn what's worked, what didn't work, what strategies might be applicable to the problem that we're trying to solve, or what ones, maybe don't fit so much. 2, really, really, really intentional about surrounding ourselves with some good advisors. We have some really, really helpful advisors who have brought, some of their experience to the table and told us what worked for them and what didn't work for them. So really be thoughtful around, who you're putting on your advisory board, and making sure that their background and their experience can, bring some expertise to the table. That, again, it's all about just taking shortcuts, right? I mean, with enough capital and time, you'll get to the answer too.
Yeah.
But if I can just quickly, jump to where they left off because they've already spent years and time and money to get to there, it's a much better way of doing it. And I think, the third thing to your point is just like, hey, how can we pull forward as much of the learnings as possible? How can we build the least amount of product as possible? How can we build not any product at all, but really just get some wireframes in front of potential users? And so I think that's probably like the third thing, is just really, really, really being religious about staying in front of your customers and talking to them as often as possible and just getting feedback. It's often the easiest and quickest way to the answer. We'll ship 1 billion different versions of something, or we could just like line up 5 interviews and like pull forward some of the qualitative feedback and get to the answer a little bit.
What I really admired about you guys is your customer was one that you knew well. I mean, in fact, like you're the customer.
We are. Yeah. Well, then.
And so we all have our own bias and about what we want and what we expect. But I really admired you guys that you didn't allow your curiosity to be flawed by the fact that you were the customer too.
Yeah.
Like I really appreciated your constant curiosity and that kind of like dogged pursuit of the voice of customer. So just to give you some props there. I thought, I think it would be weird when you feel like, well, I know, like I know what I'm on, and this is, I haven't used this. So therefore, like what they say maybe isn't valid, but I thought you all were very humble and receiving feedback, and then also consistently curious.
There are probably a subset of users out there that are very much like me and much like Teddy, and, our perspective would be great, but there's a lot of different personas out there that you have to account for. And so someone's like, all right, well, yes, I think about it like this, but let me make sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think we are surprised to learn that some of our really strong power users are like nothing like the persona that.
Yeah. And I choose what a shock.
Yeah, exactly.
So I love that you all recently expanded. Yes, you're in Dallas, Texas now.
Yes.
Would love to know how you, made the decision to expand. Like, you knew that you were ready, or is anyone ever ready? You're willing to take the risk.
Yeah.
2, why Dallas? And then 3, like, is there something you've done differently in that market from what you've learned through Charlotte?
Yep. Cool. So where should we start? One, probably just like why city number 2 in general, like because we still have so much to grow in Charlotte. And part of it was really intentional and strategic about like, hey, we know if this is going to work, it's going to have to be a nationwide brand in all major cities. And so we kind of knew like once that next round of funding event happens, we're going to be launching to multiple, markets. We decided to pull forward, a city number 2 to really pull forward the learnings and make sure that the platform had all the considerations for operating in multiple markets and make sure that our operations could handle different markets and make sure that our go-to-market strategy was applicable to multiple, markets. And so we strategically said, hey, even though we might not need to reach our growth goals, to reach our revenue targets, like let's pull forward city number 2 and really work out the kinks of launching a second market so that when we go, and, for our Series A, we can try to go to, 3, 5 cities in parallel, right? Because we already know what the playbook looks like. Why Dallas? Honestly, StreetFair is great for neighborhoods, right? And one thing we learned about around Charlotte is like when you have a true community HOA type neighborhood where people really resonate with their neighborhood and they have an online Facebook group or a Nextdoor group or, we know that it works. And so we're really looking for, hey, what other major cities have a ton of neighborhoods?
Right. Yeah.
And we really did it. Honestly, we had one of our teammates do analysis for several weeks, just looking at different major cities. We didn't want to go right to a tier 1, tier 0 city of like a New York, LA, Chicago, DC. We wanted to stay more mid-market in size, like Charlotte. I don't know. Dallas is quite a city. I think when we got off the plane for the first time in Dallas, we were like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm like, but no, we were honestly a lot of it came down to we were looking at growth rates over the last 10 or 20 years, and then really how many neighborhoods exist in that city that kind of meet our persona, and we're just trying to back into like, hey, what's the real addressable market in these various cities? And Tampa was big. Dallas was big. There were a few other close ones. Austin, Texas, not quite as big, but a great fit. Raleigh, kind of too close to Carolina. And so we went with Dallas because it was like the biggest, but not quite a New York City.
Yeah, a little bit more geography.
Yeah. So how do we approach Dallas? Honestly, like, we spent most of last year in Charlotte really trying to like refine the playbook, right? Because, one of the approaches we took in Charlotte, and that's the same approach we're taking in Dallas, is like start small, right? Yeah. We got it working in my neighborhood, and then we got it working in my town, right, in my zip code, and then we got it working in like the surrounding areas. And, with different hyper local, marketplace or network effect type businesses, that is really important strategy, right? You start with the smallest atomic unit, and then you can work your way out. And like, it's no joke that it gets easier and easier and easier, the more that you grow. And so we took a very similar approach. We picked a zip code and a neighborhood in Dallas and proved out that we can get it working. And then, we just started kind of scaling out from there, which also kind of helps de-risk things, right? If we're just like, going neighborhood by neighborhood and it's just not working and the numbers just aren't matching up, like, great. Like, then we just like kind of pause and reevaluate. But luckily, I mean, it was maybe a quiet few weeks at first. And we're like, and then things just really, really started taking off. So it's been fun to watch the growth. And, it's also been fun, like, when we were doing it in Charlotte, we were having to build the product. We were having to learn. We're like, constantly trying to like fix things that we just never would have thought of. We've got a pretty strong core product, platform that now it's really more around distribution, right? It's around taking the go-to-market playbook that we established in Charlotte, onboarding, the different businesses in Dallas, and then going. So
you're getting to deploy and monitor versus like build all at the same time. Yeah.
So thinking back, Mike, I mean, that's a really good picture of like where you guys are and the exciting growth that you're happening. As you think back to like, I gave you guys really mad props around solid go-to-market strategy, really great foundation and discipline of how to build your business. But there were still some big risks around the product offering itself.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us, like go back in time for us. What led to the decision for you guys to kind of reach out to us? I know it's a bit of a commercial here. Forgive us for that. But it's the part of the journey that Julie and I had the privilege of participating in with you.
Yeah.
Talk to us about some of those big questions and maybe some of the learnings that came out of that helped propel and shape the trajectory of StreetFair.
Totally. I mean, at the time we were months old, right? I built like a very basic prototype that we validated in the market, and we raised on it, and we put our jobs on it, and we hired a team on it. And so we woke up and we're like, all right, we've got a couple $1 million in the bank account. We've got a team. We've got a problem that we've observed in the marketplace. Like, how do we go solve for it? And it was around that time I was meeting with some old friends and mentors who had, done a design sprint before. And one of them just kind of planted the seed of like, hey, did you ever think about doing something like this? And, I brought it back to Teddy and said, hey, like, we could probably take a little bit of a shortcut here. I need you to like get on board with a little bit of an investment up front, but I feel like it will save us tons of money down the road. Luckily, he was very agreeable to it, and I think even today he would look back and say it was probably the best investment we made. And it really just a lot of like, listen, the product that exists today looks nothing like what we thought. I mean, it's just some of the early kind of features and visions that were in like the earliest versions of the prototypes were just hilarious to look at. Now I'm like, not only have like a core product, I want to go revisit some of those. I mean, they're really cool.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to allow the design sprint to really shape that initial version. And thank God we did, because really by the time we took the product to market in March of 2021, 2022, it kind of worked, right? Like, we were now working on rounding out the different scenarios that we didn't think about, but like people were immediately finding the businesses, they were booking services, they were coming back for more. So really grateful for that process.
Talk to us, like, I remember there was a strong point, which you have to come in with a strong point of view, right? And then it's up to you to have the discipline and openness to follow where the data, the customer leads you, and where the real value is. But you guys had a kind of a strong point of view, for example, around pricing, and that you were kind of potentially going to structure your product around real big savings. And I know that's still definitely part of the core value problem, but I'm hinting at like what did we learn from that maybe surprised us and bringing that to a different shaping of the value problem.
Totally. I think part of it was like we were almost just like too smart on like the other side of the table. We came about the observation from the home maintenance business side of things. And so what we were looking at, it was around efficiency and was around marketing to people in a small area and passing along some type of group discount. And so when we came into this, we were just very much around driving savings and cost reductions and group discounts to the consumer side. And that's still a big part of what the product is today. But what we quickly learned was that it was almost like the third thing that people cared about, right? One is like people wanted to find quality businesses that they can trust, that they were reliable, that would communicate, that would show up. I mean, it's amazing to me how people are like, I love when I book a service on StreetFair. You want to know why? Because I know the business will call me. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Right? Call it. Like, all right, we'll go with it. And then it was around convenience. It was around like, hey, they wanted to do the least amount of work to find that quality. They wanted to book something with a click of a button, right? And then the third was like price, right? And to this day, we don't want to be like the economy, like discount platform for home services. We want people to get a fair market price and feel like they don't have to worry about getting ripped off because someone is just trying to price gouge them. But early on, it was very almost felt like over-indexed on the group discount aspect.
Yeah. It was interesting in that first part of the design sprint. I'll never forget hearing from our customers that they felt like because it was cheap, it felt inauthentic or salesy or like, can I trust this? And as soon as we changed the language and the value prop, they were ready to sign up the next iteration. And so I just think that's something that's important when people are launching a product or service or a business. It's not just what it is that you're giving, it's how you talk about it that matters, and knowing what it is that people really, really value and want and need. It's easy to lead with price or...
We're 2 years in and we're still refining that stuff because we're just learning more and more that like, oh, wow, okay, this is actually the thing that people love the most is that it's like recommendations from their...
Yeah.
Okay, well, we really need to upweight that.
Interesting.
That's fine.
I think, the thing that made, I think, us work together really well as I look back on it was like, you're just philosophically completely aligned with how we operate. And I think we often have to do some education with our client teams and get them to think, and you guys just came with that mindset already ready to go, which just made our work that much easier and more fun. Even as I say that though, like we were having heated battle because that's what we do. Like we're putting it through the ringer. We're trying to poke all the holes just like you guys are. And so I think back, like I remember those were some really heated conversations, but ultimately we're all aligned in terms of where we're trying to go. We're trying to get them better.
Right.
But you have to have some of those collisions that we talk. I mean, even the concepts of like you and Teddy and being, the marriage, like that has to be. And I think that's where if you have a solid foundation, it allows for those honest knowledge. You have to.
I mean, listen, we still have them all tonight, right? But it comes from the right place. It comes from the like super passionate about the mission, and we're very clear on the long-term direction and where we want to go. But when you're building a product, it's hard. You don't know what the user wants, what's going to resonate. You have different perspectives, and a lot of times our new thing is like, all right, cool, let's disagree and bet. We're going to pick A.
Love it.
Okay, we're going to go with that. And we're going to test it, and we're going to let the data decide.
Yeah.
And then, but we have a wall that's listed all the different bets or something like, because it's a good, healthy debate. And eventually you got to stack hands and say, I might not agree, but I will disagree and commit to this experiment. And then we will let our users validate whether we were right or wrong.
Right.
Because we don't know.
Yeah. I love that. We're short on time, but I do want to get you a quick feedback. Did the design sprint help? Because I think cerebrally, we all know this stuff, especially rating lean startup and other resources that are out there. But did the design sprint help at all with like making like, oh, this is actually not so hard, or it kind of debunked the mystery, or was that already like something you brought to the table?
I think mystery aside, I think it helped us to get to the right version of the product to bring to the market. I actually think that like, if I were a VC, I would have like, here's my $1 million, in your seed round or pre-seed or whatever. And by the way, two prerequisites. One, go read the lean startup, and two, go do a design sprint before you start coding. Right. And then let's get started. And I think everyone's just either already has a vision in their mind of like what the product's going to be, and so they just want to like go build it. But it helped immensely in kind of shaping the early vision of the product and got us headed down the right path earlier.
Yeah. Awesome. We often say like fall in love with the challenge of the problem, not the solution.
Yeah.
And I think
it's hard.
Exactly right.
Because you have this vision in mind of what the solution is, and it's not like your solution's cool, but like you're actually trying to drive user behavior, and your users are not doing anything with that features. Yeah.
Right. So what are you reading right now? You said you're a big reader. Is there anything that's on your...
So, yes, I actually just finished a book called Smart Brevity. Have you read it?
No.
Okay. It's actually a great read. It's a quick read. It's by the guy. It's by the guys who started Axios, and it's really we struggle with this all the time. We don't have a big team, right? So we don't have like a bunch of content writers all over the place. One of the things we'll debate a lot is like content, right, and like copy, and it's actually really important in terms of email subject lines or CTAs in the product or what text. And so it was just a really good read just around how to be really thoughtful and brief on like what you're like. People don't read, right? We talked about this extensively. We're so apt to just go write a huge paragraph of things that, okay, well, no one's going to read that. So just how do we, capture users' attention? How do we make sure that the one thing that we really wanted them to take away from that screen or that CTA or that email or that push notification is really, coming across. So I know I need a good one. You got any good recommendations?
Oh man, I've been up just a ton of oldies and but goodies. Do you have anything there that you're
Well, so I'm a big believer in reading novels and fiction because I think that helps craft story and it brings like real problems into light. Adam Grant just had a great quote about the beauty of reading fiction. So that's sort of what I'm like really focused on that right now because I feel like it builds empathy, knowledge, and able to like connect dots with other things. So.
I could use it. I haven't read a fiction book in
Yeah.
20
Yeah.
years. I could balance it out.
Yeah.
It is nice to get out of the real world for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'll go back and reread. Like I've read so many books over the last like 5 or 10 years, and a lot of them are still so relevant to what we're doing. And so I find myself going back and like rereading things that are very pertinent to the phase and the journey that we're on. Like I just reread The Platform Revolution. Great book for anyone who plans on starting a marketplace business. I make every new hire at StreetFair go read The Lean Startup. And it's just like our vibe. Awesome.
I love it. Well, thank you so much Mike, for your time. It's always a pleasure for all the insights. And
I'm Jake Knapp, and I'm the creator of the Design Sprint process. I'm the author of this book, Sprints, and I am here at the Wiley offices in Charlotte, North Carolina. This right here, if you were thinking about maybe doing a design sprint with Wiley, this is where you would be at this table, probably, unless you do it at your office, which is totally an option. But right here in this space with a whiteboard, with a bunch of paper and pens, basically, they're going to help you think through a big problem, get it started, and get a solution tested really rapidly. That's the whole idea with a design sprint. I'd highly recommend, if you're thinking about it, that you do give Wiley a chance to your project. I've worked with these folks a couple times, and they always exceed my expectations. I always do things a little bit better than I could have imagined ahead of time. They're also really nice. So don't tell them I told you that. I try to, keep it cool, but they're super nice people. Anyway, best of luck to you, and try Sprint.